So it is really a treat now as we turn the corner here to introduce you to a friend who, it's a real pleasure to talk to somebody who does something nice for a living. Because a lot of the times the stuff I have to talk about is just, cruddy stuff. But this is what the news business is about, and, I do the comments on that. But Charles Freericks, a former television executive, no slouch, worked at CBS, developed primetime programming, Wilshire Court, NBC Newline, such little known about projects like The Temptations, The Twilight Zone. I mean, this is phenomenal. And to be able to see you again, Charles, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It's really a pleasure to have you. And there's a couple of books that you're not taking from my hands anymore. And what I like about the writing, and then I want to get into why you do it, is how down to earth it is. And I know sometimes people say that, but some books you pick them up and you're reading a book. You know what I feel like when I pick Fartarama? Did I just see that in your writing?
Fartalina.
Okay, so when I pick up this book, my imaginary friend was too cool to hang out with me.
Yes.
It's like taking me back instantly into my own earlier years when things were simpler in the world. Did you intend to set out to write a story? This is one of two books. The other one I'm going to ask you to read in part to the audience. This book, is this about your growing up period? And if so, how did you make it so readable? Because, I enjoy it completely.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's all true stories. And basically, it took me about 5 years because what I discovered in the writing of it is that memory itself is actually something that comes and goes. It's very transient. So what I remembered when I started was different than what I remember when I finished. And what you said before to me was actually what I set out to get people to say, which is, wow, that reminds me of my childhood. Even if you didn't grow up in Paramus, New Jersey, where I did.
It does. For instance, my own personal home ATM. I thought that was mom and dad.
Yeah, exactly.
What was it like for you growing up?
Well, I was kind of the nerdy kid who didn't really quite understand the rules. I didn't understand that the reason I didn't have an imaginary friend was that you have to actually imagine him. And I know these things sound simple, but it's kind of a funny thing. I was always, I guess, always trying to fit in a little too much, a little too hard, and thus was not fitting in. And part of the book, sort of the arc in the book, is discovering how to become social, how to become friends with people.
You're talking to a fellow geek in high school, and I never had dates. Nobody paid attention to me. I was the chubby kid, they said, standing on the corner who went to school half a day and worked in the afternoon. That was my claim to fame, and so I read this, and I identify with it, except for one chapter. Man, do I envy you. You write in here, I had a subscription to Playboy in the 8th grade?
Yes. I had a very understanding mother.
How did you swing that? Really?
I really,
Understanding mom?
It's kind of a funny thing because now as the father of teenagers, I'm utterly shocked that she allowed that. But yeah, I actually went to her and I asked, because you got the Publishers Weekly clearing with all the little stickers in it each month, and one day Playboy was one of the little stamps, and I went to her and I said, "Can I do this?"
But you asked her.
I asked,
and
she said yes, if you use your own money. And if you read the home ATM, you know where I got my money from. So
you were a very imaginative guy. I mean, you figured out ways and things that you could do.
Yeah.
There is crying in baseball. Were you a lousy baseball player as a kid or what?
I didn't even really rise to the level of lousy. And sort of what prompted that was I went to a camp that Roy Campanella, the Dodger great, ran. And I was so bad that he took me aside away from out of the camp community and tried to teach me, which, of course, he failed at because I was unteachable. But he did tell me that. He told me there's crying in baseball. And when we saw that movie by Tom Hanks where he said, there's no crying in baseball, I wanted to stand up and scream and go, Roy Campanella told me that there is.
What do you feel, Charles, writing something like this? And by the way, I want to share with everyone that this is a book you can get on Amazon. But here's the real thing to me. It is something that in a couple of 100 pages, it seems to bring back a lot of my own memories. And it encourages people to also relive certain portions of their life.
Exactly.
Now, what was this for you? I mean, why was this important?
You know, it was a chance to take snapshots of my life and put them in a book and in a way almost rid myself of them, if that makes sense. Not that I was doing this for any kind of psychological journey. It was fun. Some people scrapbook. Maybe this was my way of scrapbooking. It was, just these were things that had happened. These were things that I found interesting and I thought were funny and I thought people would relate to and find their own lives in. And that was what hit me.
One of the other things that I also want to draw our listeners' attention to is this wonderful new book, When the Sun Sets in the East. And these are poems. And there was one in particular that really caught me because I've read it before. Well, I've read it because I've read your works. It's called Night in L.A. And what I like about it is when I came to L.A., the thing that I enjoyed about it, I think there's two L.A.s. There's the daytime L.A., then there's the city of angels at night. But you speak of a grittiness in the city. Share with me a portion of this because I think for our listeners who may want to see the city from a different perspective, this is wonderful. Go.
A soup of smog and street lamps make Orion as hard to see as God. Herded through the tangled rivers of 405, 105, and 5, a creeping rash of tail lamps and smoke scud across the basin. If darkness is the absence of light, why does darkness feel like something when light is nothing? Buildings born to be cheap motels with balconies, glazed doors, and swimming pools grow armors of soot. The city's foul, lovers draw drapes. Parking meters are the only crop that grows. Homelessness is the only job that pays. Concrete is good, one cop explains to me, at soaking the urine up real quick.
Oh! Where did that come from? Where did that come from in you? What was the catalyst to writing this?
It's funny. When I first got here, I came here to go to SC for grad school, and I would just drive around Los Angeles very much by myself. I didn't know anyone yet, and it was just it was really an attempt to record what I had experienced because I didn't have anyone to tell about it, I didn't have anyone to talk about it, and I found LA to be much grittier and much have a lot more texture than I ever expected it to. I expected palm trees and Beverly Hills, and I remember even just going down to Malibu and finding these metal things sticking out of the water that was so much more like Newark or Detroit or Cleveland than I'd first expected.
So what you saw when you arrived, was it very different from what you had expected?
Utterly different. It had nothing to do with what I expected. What I expected was a very small piece of what I actually saw, which was the shimmering lights from the top of Mulholland Drive and the Brady Bunch house.
Yes. Well, leave it to Beaver World. Why do you continue to write? In other words, you have a couple of books here, and yet a lot of people think they do everything on the internet. I mean, I spend 90% of my time reading stuff in the virtual world. I love the idea. I have a granddaughter, Riley, who enjoys carrying books, even though she can't read yet. She's getting close. And she says, Pops, almost. And I try to sit there with her, and I'm holding her back only because, I know it's going to be a little bit before she can really dig into stuff, but it's going to open up a world. Why did you decide to bound this into a book and still put out a book?
It just felt right. I mean, it just, I'm going to go back again to what I said about, creating, about scrapbooking or creating a photo album. These are, I try to write photographically. I try to write in images and I like holding those in my hand and being able to flip through them.
Did you ever think you'd end up as an author? Because I know that as a development executive, you had a very different world. You and I met in that world some eons ago, and now you're a writer. This has got to be a lot of fun.
I was always a writer. I was a writer who was pretending to be a development executive. Which was,
when it pays well.
Yeah. It was a nice little run there, actually, I'll admit. It was kind of fun. I kind of miss all those nice lunches and people, and limousines showing up to the house and calling me Mr. Freericks.
Isn't that
was a nice business.
And today, what do you see next for you?
Well, I'm going to continue writing. I'm actually working on a book about my time as a TV exec, which is called I Can't Believe You Took Me Seriously. And And I'm also right now. Had done a lot of plays in the 80s and 90s, which were produced in Los Angeles and New York, and I'm now working on editing those and getting those into book form.
I have to ask you, yesterday, if you look across over there, it used to be the NBC building. Now it's the Burbank Studios. My God. I mean, it's
my God, what happened?
They changed it. Well, NBC's gone. I mean, it's still there, I think, but now it's the Burbank Studios, and, they've moved over to Universal. What do you think about all this craziness where the industry has just completely changed in the last, I would say, 6, 7, 8 years?
The corporations have just taken over everything, and it's
is that for the
is
that for the better, Charles?
No, because eventually, when you've got these large corporations, you've got one or two voices that are in the end making the decision. I mean, there may be an openness to a large amount of views out there because of the commercial potential in having a large amount of views, but in the end, really, there's just way too much power concentrated in way too small a universe.
So people who are listening, who are the creatives, and I have a son who is, and we have mutual friends who are still creatives. Mm-hmm. Is there another way now? Is the power of the internet to go via this portal to reach the world, the audience, as you're doing here and through other platforms? Is that the future?
You know what? I think I'm going to say yes and no. I mean, the problem with the internet is everyone works for free on the internet, and
do I know that?
And it's a wonderful thing that people give everyone things away for free, but in the end, you can't pay your mortgage, you can't buy your food, and you can't pay for your car. And I think that the model is temporarily broken, and they need to figure out how to pay artists in this new and wild world of the internet.
And I wonder if we as consumers are also getting used to the idea of, as you say, the internet is free in terms of anything I access, I want it now,
right.
I want it quickly, and I don't want to pay for it. And yet, people like you create, and people like me who also do the same, we've got to monetize it some way.
Yeah, and I don't have an answer to that yet. I just know that when you and I were growing up,
right.
we got TV for free, and we had all of the channels for free, and now we're paying $60, $70, $80, $90 a month for what we used to get for free. So, I mean, not to be a capitalist here, just to be honest about the fact that people need to earn a living. I think there has to be some kind of shift there.
Well, I certainly want to thank you, Charles, for sharing these moments with us.
Thank you.
And maybe I'd ask you to give those creatives out there a final word of encouragement. What do they do if they're trying to fend their way and navigate their way through this changing world of getting stuff like this out to the world?
I think this is going to sound silly, but what I always try and remind myself was never forget what it felt like to touch the grass in my yard when I was growing up. Never forget what the trees smelled like. You have to come from your heart. You have to come from your real experience. You have to come from things that you know that really happened. That is where true creativity comes from. That is where you will succeed. If you try and come up with the next Gilligan's Island, it'll be a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox. And I'm sorry that I made such an old reference as Gilligan's Island, but you know what I'm saying.
Everyone here understood you. Charles Freericks, we're going to put a link on our webpage to how people can find your works. The latest book, When the Sun Sets in the East, and the previous work, My Imaginary Friend Was Too Cool to Hang Out With Me. A friend, author, and certainly a visionary. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right.